Welcome to the Arlington Street Church podcast. Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Please visit ascboston.org for more information about this historic Unitarian Universalist congregation. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
Nearly 2,000 years ago, Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote these lines in his diary. "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He was a member of the ancient philosophical school of Stoicism, founded in Athens by Zeno of Citium in the 3rd century BC. When we hear the word Stoic, many people think of a modern definition, namely, a person who can endure pain or hardship without showing their feelings or complaining. Unfortunately, this definition fails Marcus Aurelius and so many others. Stoicism has a few essential teachings. It reminds us of how unpredictable the world can be, how brief our moment of life is, and finally, that we do not control and cannot rely on external events, only ourselves and our responses to them. It's built for action, not endless debate. Marcus Aurelius' words inspired Ryan Holiday to write "The Obstacle is the Way," the timeless art of turning trials into triumph. The book is rooted in Stoicism, but only mentions it by name a few times. Holiday's approach is pragmatic, not theoretical. He tells many stories of famous people that illustrate timeless Stoic lessons. Holiday seeks to help us achieve the very specific and increasingly urgent goal we all share: overcoming obstacles. Mental obstacles, physical obstacles, emotional obstacles, perceived obstacles. According to Holiday, overcoming obstacles is a fluid and interconnected cycle with 3 critical steps: perception, action, and will. For some of us, this might seem like an unusual or illogical order. We can most likely agree that perception comes first, but doesn't will precede action? Don't we have to motivate ourselves before we do something? Holiday encourages us to take a journey and consider his alternative view. Step 1, perception. Perception is how we see and understand what occurs around us and what we decide those events will mean. Holiday tells this story in the chapter "Love Everything That Happens," Amor Fati. At around 5:30 in the evening on December 10th, 1914, a massive explosion erupted in West Orange, New Jersey. 10 buildings in legendary inventor Thomas Edison's plant, which made up more than half of the site, were engulfed in flames. Between 6 and 8 fire departments rushed to the scene, but the chemical-fueled inferno was too powerful to put out quickly. Edison calmly walked over to his 24-year-old son, Charles, as he watched the fire destroy his dad's work. In a childlike voice, Edison told his son, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." When Charles objected, Edison said, "It's all right. We just got rid of a lot of rubbish." After thoroughly surveying the damage, Edison determined that he'd lost over $900,000, about $23 million in today's dollars. The flames had consumed years of priceless records and prototypes, and his plant's insurance covered only about a third of the total damage. But after just 3 weeks, with a sizable loan from his friend Henry Ford, Edison got part of the plant up and running again. His employees worked overtime and set to work producing more than ever. Edison and his team went on to make almost $10 million in revenue the following year. Our perceptions can be a source of strength or of weakness. If we are emotional, subjective, and short-sighted, we only add to our troubles. To prevent becoming overwhelmed by the world around us, the Stoics encourage us to limit our passions and their control over our lives. It takes skill and discipline to rid ourselves of bad perceptions, to separate reliable signals from deceptive ones, to filter out prejudice, expectation, and fear. But it's worth it, for what's left is truth. While others are excited or afraid, we will remain peaceful and calm. We will see things simply as they truly are, neither good nor bad. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Step 2, action. Holliday recounts this anecdote in the chapter, Seize the Initiative. In the spring of 2008, Barack Obama's presidential campaign was imperiled. A race scandal involving inflammatory remarks by his pastor, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, threatened to unravel his campaign, to break the thin bond he'd established between black and white voters at a critical moment in the primaries. Race, religion, demographics, controversy emulsified into one. It was the kind of disaster that political campaigns do not survive, leaving most candidates so paralyzed by fear that they defer taking action. Their typical response is to hide, ignore, obfuscate, or distance themselves. Against all advice and convention, Barack Obama decided that he would take action, and this negative situation was actually a teachable moment. He channeled the attention and energy swirling around the controversy to draw a national audience and speak directly to the American people of the divisive issue of race. This address, known today as the A More Perfect Union speech, was a transformative moment. Instead of distancing himself, Obama spoke to everything directly. In doing so, he not only neutralized a potentially fatal storm, but created an opportunity to seize the electoral high ground. Absorbing the power of that negative situation, his campaign was instantly infused with an energy that propelled him into the White House. As a discipline, it's not any kind of action that will do, but right action. Everything must be done in the service of the whole. Step by step, action by action, we can dismantle the obstacles in front of us. With persistence and flexibility, we can act in the best interest of our goals. Our movements and decisions define us. Action requires courage, not brashness, creative application, and not brute force. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Step 3, will. The Stoics encourage us to develop what they called an inner citadel that fortress inside of us that can never be affected by the outside world. Willpower needs to be cultivated. We must prepare for hardship and turmoil. We must learn the art of acceptance and practice cheerfulness, even in dark times. I recently listened to an incredibly inspiring TED Talk by Janine Shepherd. These are her words. As a member of the Australian cross-country ski team headed towards the Winter Olympics, I was on a training bike ride with my teammates. It was the perfect autumn day, sunshine, the smell of eucalypt, and a dream. Life was good. We'd been on our bikes for 5.5 hours when we got to the part of the ride that I loved, and that was the hills. I got up off the seat of my bike and I started pumping my legs. And as I sucked in the cold mountain air, I could feel it burning my lungs. And I looked up to see the sun shining in my face. And then everything went black. Where was I? What was happening? My body was consumed by pain. I'd been hit by a speeding utility truck with only 10 minutes left on the bike ride. She goes on to tell about her horrific injuries and life-threatening surgeries in extreme detail, and finishes this part of her story with chilling words from her surgeon. Janine, you'll have to rethink everything you do in your life because you're never going to be able to do the things you did before. She continues, they moved me from intensive care to acute spinal, where I shared the ward with 5 other people. There were no superficial conversations as we shared our innermost thoughts, our fears, and our hopes for life after the spinal ward. I remember one night, one of the nurses came in, Jonathan, with a whole lot of plastic straws. He put a pile on top of each of us, and he said, start threading them together. Well, there wasn't much else to do in the spinal ward, so we did. When we finished, he went around silently, and he joined up all the straws till they looped around the whole ward. Then he said, okay, everybody, hold on to your straws. And we did. And he said, right, now we are all connected. And as we held on and breathed as one, we knew we weren't on this journey alone. Even lying paralyzed in the spinal ward, there were moments of incredible depth and richness, of authenticity and connection that I had never experienced before. Each of us knew that when we left the spinal ward, we would never be the same. After 6 months, Janine went home in a wheelchair, weighing less than 80 pounds, wrapped in a plaster cast from neck to foot, attached to a catheter bottle, and paralyzed from the waist down. She realized that she'd never be Janine the Machine again and got horribly depressed. She resumes. And then one day, I knew, just like before, I realized that I had a choice. I could keep fighting this, or I could let go and accept not only my body, but the circumstances of my life. Then I stopped asking, why me? And I started to ask, why not me? And then I thought to myself, maybe being at rock bottom is actually the perfect place to start. I had never before thought of myself as a creative person. I was an athlete. My body was a machine. But now I was about to embark on the most creative project that any of us could ever do, that of rebuilding a life. And even though I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do, in that uncertainty came a sense of freedom. I was no longer tied to a set path. I was free to explore life's infinite possibilities. And that realization was about to change my life. As Lao Tzu said, when you let go of what you are, you become what you might be. Janine finishes her riveting story about first becoming a private pilot, then achieving her twin engine and instrument ratings, followed by her commercial pilot's license, and finally, her instructor rating, where she was able to teach at the same school where she'd had her first flight just under 18 months after she left the spinal ward. Janine has since learned to fly upside down and is now an acrobatics flying instructor. Too often people think that will is how bad we want something. Actually, the will has a lot more to do with surrender than with strength. True will is quiet humility, resilience, and flexibility. The other kind of will is weakness disguised by bluster and ambition. Dear friends, here is one way to think of adversity: the failure, the end, the last dance, the swan song, the final out. Here is an alternative viewpoint: an opportunity to comprehend perception, action, and will. A chance to learn about endurance, patience, resilience, struggle, creativity, yourself, and other people. When faced with an obstacle, let's join our straws together and think of it with the latter perspective. A Zen master once said, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path." Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition. So may it be. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. We would love to hear from you via email at office@ascboston.org or through our Facebook page. If you would like to support the good work of Arlington Street Church, please consider a contribution by check in the mail or through our website, ascboston.org.